Tana Mongeau has never been a stranger to controversy, but this latest drama might be one of the most confusing twists yet. What started as a simple podcast conversation has spiraled into a game of broken telephone, with Tana, Todd Smith, Jeff Wittek, and even Trisha Paytas caught in the middle. But here's the shocking part. Every single person involved seems to remember the story completely differently. At the center of it all is one question: who's actually telling the truth, and who's rewriting history? Because according to Tana, she was confronted in a way that left her furious. According to Todd, the entire situation was just a joke gone wrong. And Jeff, well, he seems to think it was about something else entirely. This isn't just drama, it's a messy clash of memories, egos, and internet storytelling. And as Tana herself admitted, it nearly dragged her back into her chaotic, old Tana era. But how did such a small moment from years ago explode into one of the strangest celebrity feuds we've seen this year? Let's break it down. This entire feud could have stayed buried in the past, forgotten like so many minor YouTube spats. But the spark that reignited everything came when Jeff Wittek decided to bring Todd Smith back onto his podcast, Jeff FM. Now, keep in mind, Jeff and Todd haven't exactly been best friends in recent years. Todd was a part of the infamous Vlog Squad, the same group that Jeff eventually distanced himself from after all the chaos surrounding David Dobrik. So when Jeff invited Todd onto his show, fans were already expecting some tea to spill. And spill it did. At one point, Jeff casually brought up an old moment involving Todd and Tana. What should have been a quick laugh turned into Todd laying out his version of events. According to him, the drama that Tana had been talking about for years was nothing more than a misunderstanding, a joke gone wrong. He described a night where Tana tried to hop into a group photo, and instead of welcoming her in, he jokingly covered her face with his hand. End of story, right? Not even close. Because the way Todd told it, you'd think Tana had blown this innocent moment into something way more dramatic. He even hinted that people online twisted it into accusations of him assaulting her, something Tana never actually claimed in the first place. The problem? His entire retelling didn't just miss the mark. It sounded like he was talking about a completely different situation. And that's when fans started asking the question, was Todd genuinely confused, or was he rewriting history to save face? Because for Tana, this wasn't about a playful photo prank. This was about a heated confrontation at the Babylon movie premiere, where she says Todd came at her for something she had mentioned on Jeff's podcast. In her eyes, Todd was defending David Dobrik and taking shots at her for being too outspoken. Two completely different stories. Same night, same people, but the versions couldn't be further apart. And just like that, the internet was split. Some viewers sided with Todd, saying Tana was overreacting. Others argued Todd was gaslighting her, pretending nothing serious ever happened. And caught right in the middle of it all, Jeff Wittek, who seemed just as confused as everyone else. But here's where it gets messy. What Todd thought the drama was about, and what Tana actually said happened, don't even line up. And that's exactly why Tana's response hit harder than anyone expected. To understand why this whole thing spiraled out of control, we have to rewind to the night that started it all, the Babylon movie premiere. For Tana, this wasn't just another Hollywood event. It was the night she claims Todd Smith confronted her face-to-face, furious about something she had said earlier on Jeff's podcast. The topic, a vague but pointed remark about members of the Vlog Squad still secretly missing Jeff, but not having the courage to say it directly to him. Tana never mentioned Todd's name, never called him out specifically, but when they crossed paths at the premiere, Todd made it crystal clear he thought she had been talking about him. And according to Tana, he didn't just disagree, he came at her neck. She remembers him snapping back with the phrase, "There are two sides to every story," seemingly defending his loyalty to David Dobrik and dismissing her take entirely. In that moment, Tana's frustration boiled over. On Jeff's podcast, she recalled wanting to unleash her old, reckless side and told Todd off in her own unfiltered way. Her words, blunt, explicit, and exactly the kind of thing that proved she wasn't afraid of confrontation. For Tana, this wasn't about some petty Hollywood squabble. It was about being disrespected for speaking the truth. She insisted that what she said on Jeff's show was real, vague enough not to attack anyone directly, and absolutely not a lie. To her, Todd's reaction was less about what she said and more about his own guilt for still being associated with people Jeff had fallen out with. And here's the kicker. Tana claimed she was yelled at in public, accused of starting drama when, in her mind, she hadn't even dropped names. That was the breaking point. Because nothing infuriates Tana more than someone twisting her words and trying to call her a liar when she knows she's telling the truth. So for her, the Babylon premiere wasn't about photos or playful moments. It was about being cornered, called out, and left fuming. And yet, Todd's version of the same night couldn't be more different. If you ask Todd Smith what happened that night, you'll hear a story so different from Tana's that you'd think they were at two completely separate events. According to Todd, there was no heated argument, no dramatic confrontation, no coming at Tana's neck. Instead, his version boils down to a light-hearted joke at the premiere. He says Tana tried to hop into a photo with him and Zayn, and instead of smiling for the camera, he threw his hand up to cover her face. A harmless gag, something he insists wasn't meant to be taken seriously. End of story, at least in his eyes. But here's where it gets strange. While retelling the situation on Jeff FM, Todd acted like the real controversy was people online accusing him of something much darker, suggesting fans twisted the narrative into an assault accusation. That's where the disconnect hit hard, because at no point did Tana ever say Todd laid a hand on her or got physical in that way. Her story was about words, not actions. But somehow, Todd's defense was built around clearing his name from accusations she never even made. It felt like two completely different realities colliding. Tana's version painted Todd as defensive and confrontational, while Todd's made it sound like she had exaggerated an innocent joke into a scandal. Even Jeff seemed confused, struggling to piece together what Todd was actually responding to. Was Todd talking about Tana's vague podcast comment about the vlog squad? Or was he doubling down on the idea that this was all about some random photo moment? The lines were blurred, and the more Todd talked, the less it connected to what Tana had originally said. And that's when fans started asking, was Todd genuinely misremembering the night, or was he rewriting history to protect his reputation? Because to many, his retelling didn't just sidestep the drama, it made the situation sound way worse than Tana's original claim. For Tana, hearing this version later felt like a slap in the face. And when she finally addressed it, she didn't hold back. If there's one person who should have been able to clear things up, it was Jeff Wittek. After all, the entire situation started with a conversation on his podcast years ago. But when Todd sat across from him on Jeff FM to set the record straight, Jeff's reaction didn't solve anything. In fact, it made the story even more confusing. At first, Jeff seemed to think the whole two sides to every story line was about him and Tana, as if they had opposing versions of some petty argument. But that wasn't it at all. What Tana had originally meant was that Todd defended David Dobrik by insisting there were two sides to David and Jeff's falling out, a completely separate feud that had nothing to do with her. So while Jeff was nodding along like he understood, the reality is he was mixing up conflicts and blurring timelines, leaving listeners even more lost. 1 minute it sounded like Tana versus Todd, the next, Todd versus Jeff. Then, suddenly, David's name was dragged back into the mix. It was a messy overlap of grudges, rumors, and half-truths. And this is where the telephone game of internet drama kicked in full force. Jeff thought Todd was talking about one thing, Todd thought Tana accused him of something entirely different, and Tana was furious because neither of their versions matched what actually happened. By the time the podcast ended, fans weren't left with clarity, they were left with chaos. Instead of smoothing things over, Jeff's attempt at revisiting old drama only reignited it. And when Tana finally saw Todd's version of events, her patience snapped. She didn't just laugh it off, she went on Trisha Paytas' podcast and unleashed her raw, unfiltered side once again. When Tana Mongeau finally sat down with Trisha Paytas to talk about Todd's version of events, she didn't hold back. In fact, you could see how much the situation had been eating at her. Right away, she admitted that hearing Todd twist the story triggered her in one of the worst ways possible. She's been working hard to reinvent herself, what she calls her peaceful era, but nothing sets her off faster than someone lying on her name. And in her words, that's exactly what Todd did. Tana told Trisha that she knew what she had said on Jeff's podcast all those years ago. It was vague, it was truthful, and it was never meant to target anyone directly. But Todd taking it personally, then retelling the story in a completely different way, that was enough to make her want to snap back into old Tana mode, the one who clapped back without a filter and turned every slight into a viral scandal. "I've been fighting demons," she admitted, half joking but clearly serious. She said she had to stop herself from dragging Todd even harder, from spilling even messier details, just to prove her point. At one moment, she even confessed she wanted to bring up the pool and expose even more dirt, but she bit her tongue. Why? Because she didn't want to ruin the piece she's worked so hard to create. And she made something else clear: if she was going to lie about someone for attention, it wouldn't be Todd Smith. In classic Tana fashion, she laughed it off by saying, "If I wanted to make something up, I'd lie about Jeff Bezos, not Todd." That line alone perfectly summed up how ridiculous she thought his version of the story sounded. Tana also pointed out that she had no reason to manufacture drama with Todd at the time. Her life was already full of chaos. She had bigger issues, bigger names, and bigger controversies swirling around her. The last thing she needed was to make up a fake feud with a former Vlog Squad member. Her message was simple. She wasn't mad at Jeff. She wasn't even really mad at the internet. But Todd misremembering, or flat out lying, was something she couldn't just let slide. Because for Tana, it wasn't about clout. It was about her truth. And that's where this feud shifts into something deeper. Because if Tana is telling the truth, then why does Todd remember it so differently? At its core, this drama isn't just about a movie premiere, a podcast, or a heated exchange. It's about the way stories live and breathe on the internet, and how memory, ego, and perception can completely change what the truth even is. Think about it. Tana's version is fueled by emotion, frustration, and her need to defend herself against being misrepresented. She says she was confronted, yelled at, and unfairly accused of stirring drama she didn't even start. Todd's version, on the other hand, strips all of that away. He remembers a light-hearted joke, a silly photo moment, and insists that any controversy was blown way out of proportion. And Jeff, he's just trying to play mediator, but in the process, he mixes up the timeline and muddies the story even further. It's the perfect recipe for internet chaos, because when everyone tells their side differently, fans are left to decide which truth they want to believe. And let's be honest, on YouTube, the truth doesn't always matter as much as the narrative that gets the most attention. Tana knows this all too well. She's admitted before that her biggest trigger is being called a liar, because for someone who has built a career on being messy but authentic, having her credibility questioned cuts deeper than anything else. That's why this situation stung so badly, because in her eyes, she wasn't just dealing with a misunderstanding. She was fighting against an alternate version of history, where Todd comes out looking innocent, and she looks like the villain. And here's the irony, Todd's attempt to clear his name actually made things worse. Because while Tana said he yelled at her, Todd defended himself by clarifying that he didn't hit her, which left fans asking, who even said anything about hitting in the first place? His defense painted a darker picture than Tana ever had, and made his side sound more suspicious than hers. That's the danger of internet storytelling. One person says one thing, another remembers it differently, a third tries to mediate, but confuses the story even more. And before you know it, the internet has taken sides, blown up the clips, and turned a small misunderstanding into a full-blown scandal. For Tana, this was about holding on to her truth. For Todd, it was about saving face. And for everyone else watching, it became just another messy reminder that in the world of YouTube, the loudest version of the story is often the one that wins. One of the most surprising parts of this entire saga is how Tana handled it, or rather, how she didn't handle it in the way fans expected. The old Tana would have gone scorched earth, dragging Todd with a flood of tweets, livestream rants, and messy subtweets. But this time, she's still angry, but she's also restrained. On Trisha's podcast, she made it clear that she's been fighting hard to stay in what she calls her peaceful era. For Tana, choosing peace means biting her tongue, holding back from spilling every detail, and resisting the urge to clap back just for the sake of chaos. And while that sounds easy, she admitted it's the hardest thing she's ever done. Because when someone misrepresents you, the instinct is to prove them wrong immediately. Fans, of course, had mixed reactions. Some praised her for showing growth, saying it was refreshing to see her mature and not feed into drama the way she once did. Others weren't convinced, joking that Tana choosing peace is like a storm claiming to be calm. Because even while she's staying measured, she's still talking about it. And with Tana, talking usually leads to spilling more than she intended. Still, you can't ignore that this version of Tana feels different. She's self-aware. She knows people expect her to snap. And she's openly admitting how hard it is to resist. That honesty in itself almost makes her more relatable than ever, because fans get to see both sides of her, the girl who wants to be calm, and the one still itching to go nuclear. But the real irony here, even while Tana insists she's in her peace era, the internet doesn't necessarily want peace. They want drama. They want receipts. They want the unfiltered chaos that made her a household name in the first place. And when she holds back, it only makes people speculate more about what she isn't saying. In other words, peace may feel good for Tana, but for her audience, chaos will always be more entertaining. And just when fans thought this feud was settling down, Tana dropped one more bombshell. Her podcast Canceled with Brooke was coming to an end, and the final episodes promised to spill even more untold drama. So what really happened that night? Was Tana cornered and called out? Or was it just a harmless joke blown out of proportion? Depending on who you ask, you'll get a completely different story. And that's the beauty. and the danger of internet drama. Because once a story lives online, it stops belonging to just the people who lived it. It becomes a narrative shaped by memory, retelling, and the audience's imagination. For Tana, this feud isn't about Todd or even Jeff. It's about her truth, her growth, and her fight to stay in a peaceful era while still protecting her name. For Todd, it's about downplaying a moment he doesn't think was a big deal. And for Jeff, it's about stirring the pot without realizing just how messy the stew already was. But maybe the real takeaway is this. In the world of YouTube drama, there are never just two sides to every story. There are 3, 4, sometimes a dozen different versions, all fighting to be the one people remember. And the internet doesn't always reward accuracy. It rewards the story that makes the most noise. So now it's up to you. Do you believe Tana's fiery confrontation? Do you think Todd's memory is the real one? Or do you believe the truth is still buried somewhere in between? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because one thing's for sure, this story isn't finished.